Hi, welcome to the third instalment in our series on awareness. I'm Russell Sturgis, and this week the principle that we're looking at is the whole notion that awareness isn't having a fear of what the future holds. And the full statement that is the basis of what we're discussing today goes on to say, this means that in awareness there is no expectation, there is no attachment, there is no scarcity, no worry, and there is no anticipation. Any point at which we come to the place of being fearful, we're listening to voices from the past. So fear is the expectation and the worry and the anticipation that we have of what the future is going to bring, based on our understanding of what we've experienced or seen or witnessed in the past. So it's this whole notion that I'm going to suffer sometime in the future. And of course in the blog I make reference to the fact of going to the dentist and how many of us spend a lot of time, first of all, suffering mentally because of our fear of going to the dentist, and we many times will suffer physically because we don't act and do the things that we need to do to manage our dental health as a result of our fear. So what we have is this ongoing notion, and of course this fear and its associated notion of suffering can cover so many different areas. So the sorts of things that are not uncommon are fear of failure, whether it right from our early days in school, right through to trying things in relationship or in business. Fear of loss, the whole idea that scarcity and not having sufficient, that's also associated with fear of loss of relationship as well. Right on the back of that is the idea of being lonely and fear of loneliness, fear of rejection, the whole idea that by belonging to a certain niche or clique in society, if I step outside of their beliefs then I could be rejected, or by belonging to them I could be rejected. So there's this ongoing sense of the suffering that I could cause as a result of not conforming. Fear of death itself, and on it goes. There's a whole range of different fears that lead to us worrying and anticipating and expecting, that are constantly at the basis of how we engage life. And of course what happens is we end up thinking about worst case scenarios. So in other words, as a result of that fear, we keep on thinking about the worst that can happen. And so we go into defensive mode and into strategies for being able to circumvent the worst that could happen. And our mind becomes full of it and obsessed by it, even to the point where some people will find themselves waking every night at certain hours, and their mind will be going over these particular issues and they're being completely swamped by that. The fact that our waking hours are also filled with those fears, it's soul destroying, and it leads to disease. And of course, if any of you are familiar with the concept of traditional Chinese medicine, they associate the certain emotions with certain meridians. And so, for example, fear is associated with the kidney meridian. Worry is associated with stomach. Grief is associated with lungs. So they, for a long time, and we're talking thousands of years, the Chinese saw that there was a direct association between the fears and all of its expressions that we have and the way in which energy flows in the body, which either results in, if it's blocked because of those fears, in disease, and if it's flowing because of release from those fears, then it results in health and well-being. So what ends up happening is that you develop this whole agenda of how do I survive the prospect of suffering. What can I do to avoid it from happening? What can I do to circumvent it? And our whole energy is about trying to manage that. And we constantly have this state of fear going on within our consciousness. Now, that's opposed to the concept of awareness, where the whole idea of awareness is that as the observer, you have the capacity to be totally present to this moment, which means that in this moment, there's no reference to the past as the basis of an expectation, anticipation, or worry about what's going to happen into the future. And you'll notice that fear is not about this moment. Fear is about what's outside of this moment. Suffering can be about this moment. In other words, you can be in a place of suffering, which is fear realized ultimately. But in terms of fear itself, it's associated with another time frame. So here we have this other idea of this capacity for us to sit as the observer, to be still. Now, invariably, stillness has the capacity to be aware or to listen differently to fear. Fear invariably listens to history, or listens in most cases to the child, and many times a lot of the fears that we experience in our adult world are associated with fears that emerge from our experiences and the things that hurt or cause suffering to us in our formative years. So here we are now in this place of awareness where we're being the observer, where there's no longer any time frames outside of this moment. Now, what's interesting is that in this moment, when we're able to stay present to this instant, we have a whole different listening going on. And so we start to access ways of being able to move forward, whereas fear ultimately creates ways that shut us down. So in terms of what we're listening to now is we're listening to our gut feel or our intuition. So we start to respond to this sense of acknowledgement or okayness that gives us an idea of how to approach things. The other thing that we can have is inspiration. So all of a sudden we find ourselves being inspired as to how to move forward with things to do. And all of a sudden the focus isn't on about avoiding the suffering. The focus is really about how to live in this present moment in a much more fulfilled way, a much more meaningful way, and in a way that's much more serving to myself and to other people and to the planet. The other thing that we actually come into access with in this moment is that whole idea of divine guidance. And of course, this is very much about the mantra that's at the basis of the Enhancers Awareness Program, and is certainly the mantra that I live by, which is Longfellow's from one of his plays called The New England Tragedies. And this little bit of prose goes, "Let us then labour for an inward stillness and an inner healing, that perfect silence where the lips and the heart are still, and we no longer entertain our own imperfect thoughts and vain opinions. And God alone speaks in us, and we wait in singleness of heart that we may know his will, and in the silence of our spirits that we may do his will and do that only." So that second stanza talks about, and God alone speaks in us, and we wait in singleness of heart. So singleness of heart is about what it is that we treasure most. And of course, when we're in the place of awareness, what we treasure is stillness and peace and compassion. When we're in the place of fear, what we treasure most is suffering and survival. So coming to that place of treasuring stillness, and God alone speaks in us, and we wait in singleness of heart that we may know his will, and in the silence of our spirits that we may do his will and do that only. So this is about the whole notion that we can actually receive divine guidance, but it requires us to still the fear, to still the emotions, to still those aspects of spirit that take us away from stillness, so that we can be available to hear that still small voice and that guidance. It's in that place that we can move forward without suffering, where we can be guided to make choices and to live our lives in such a way that we don't have to have fear at all in any phase, in any expression within our lives, knowing that our greatest well-being is going to be taken care of. So, I extend an opportunity for you to consider and to take a moment to reflect on how much is fear impacting on your life, and how much do you allow awareness and observation and stillness to impact on your life and to have a direct effect in terms of how you move forward. Anyway, it's an interesting reflection and opportunity for you to give some consideration to how you've lived your life, and I dare say that if you've always done what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And maybe it's an opportunity for you to come to a place of practicing awareness. Now, that's what we do at EAP. We help you to understand and learn more about awareness. And by all means, if you want to know more, please go to our website, have a look further at our Facebook page, Enhances Awareness Program, and our website, eapmentor.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll speak to you again soon. Bye.